So, well, maybe we'll start just by sort of introducing ourselves. Would be good, and then if people are coming in during that, they won't have missed any of the formal content, as it were. um, well, maybe, yeah. I guess I'll start, and then I'll kind of pass the baton, and we can pass it round, because I've noticed that with Zoom meetings, when you invite people to come forward, they tend not to. They were waiting for somebody else. So we'll get around that by just passing the baton from one to another. So my name's David Midgley, and I teach at Jamyang Buddhist Centre, Leeds. I've been teaching there for about 25 years. And for almost all of that time, I've also been involved in environmental activism, a lot of it on climate change, but other ecological issues and ecological spirituality, I suppose. But interestingly, none of that for Jamyang Buddhist Centre, Leeds. And it was just this year that I got invited to be I think I was invited to be the environment officer, but it got changed to Eco-Dharma. So we now have, and I accepted it on the condition that it was jointly with my friend Rowena Field, who's she's not with us this evening because she's got a lot going on personally, but we've been kind of hand in hand with this for the last 6 months or so, this Eco-Dharma project. So, well, I might tell you more about myself later, but just as an introduction, that's who I am. And I'm going to pass it to Claire.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm a friend of Rowena's, and I started volunteering at Jamyang Leeds just when you got the new building, just for a couple of months whilst I was in between work. So I live in Scarborough in one of the Sami Zongs. So we're closed at the moment, so it's all very quiet. I've just joined up for the work that reconnects through Joanna Macy's work, and 2 facilitators doing that. And I've always been interested in the environment, but obviously with COVID, it's kind of, I haven't realised how serious things had got and what a mess we were in, really. So I'm trying to make a determined effort to learn more, and the most important thing, put things into action. So I felt that this group would give me a bit of motivation as well, and learn more. So thank you. Nice to meet you all on Zoom.
And you're going to pass it to?
The baton goes to Selena.
Thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone. My name is Selena. I live in Ireland, and I've been participating online in some of Jamyang's events, both Jamyang London and Jamyang Leeds. I've been to a couple of your Steps of Awakening classes, David.
Right. Okay, I've seen you before.
Yeah. I think just to echo Claire's thoughts as well. I mean, I think with COVID, it's been a bit of a wake-up call in regards to, the ecological situation. And, I've been trying, thinking a lot about, how we can bring more of a social and kind of ecological harmony to our Dharma practice and to our lives. So it's been kind of something that's on my mind, this past couple of months. So, I was really glad to see that this class was happening. So, thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks very much. Can I ask you, what part of Ireland are you from?
I'm in Tipperary, actually. Yeah, southwest.
Lovely. Okay, I love Ireland.
Great.
Thanks very much.
No worries. I'll pass the baton to Joe.
Hello, everybody. I'm a long-time member of Jamyang London, so that is my spiritual home. But at the moment, I'm in my home in Bath. I've been involved with Eco-Dharma events via my connection with the Network of Buddhist Organisations, the MBO, for which I am its education officer. But I do have a long-term interest in the climate, and like everyone here, I think my concern for the climate and the way it's going has jumped to light speed through this lockdown phase we've had. It's such a wonderful thing that groups like ourselves, thank you, David, for putting it on, are meeting, because my goodness, doesn't the world need it? Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Oh, I'm going to, yes, Wake Up Joe would be a good idea. May I pass the baton gently to Heiko? Did I get that right?
You're on mute. We can't hear you. Muted. Ah, okay.
Can you now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Very good. Very good. I'm in Camberwell in London, so not far from Jamyang and Elephant and Castle, where I've been here and there for the odd event. I mostly go to Zen Ways in Camberwell, got a meditation practice through the last years, and I have a long-standing interest in climate change, and also been sort of involved a bit with Extinction Rebellion since it's going. And yeah, so I just came recently across the resource leaflet for the first Eco-Dharma course, and yeah, it looked very interesting and intriguing, and I thought I have to listen in.
Yeah. Thanks very much, everyone, and really heartfelt welcome to the course. It's really nice to be here with you, be with other Buddhists who feel strongly about this issue. Yeah, so I ran this course. I mean, it happened completely spontaneously. There was no plan to have this course. The first time that it was run, I was been teaching for several years with the Jamyang group in York, and I was about to start a new series of teaching with them on the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, and then the lockdown happened, and I didn't feel so good about teaching that over Zoom, because I felt like the face-to-face contact was important for the transmission of the text. So yeah, in a moment we're going to do some meditation, but I'll just explain that how it actually happened. I do follow these things. It's been my main daytime activity actually since about 2003 until very recently. Was working on ecological things of one sort or another, and actually, no, it wasn't because of that, but I for other reasons. I came across a teacher called Thomas Hubel. I don't know if any of you know him, German guy. He's a spiritual teacher and a psychotherapist, and his work is on his main work is on trauma healing, including collective trauma healing. And I saw I watched a Zoom event with him, and I decided to talk about that, and it kind of led into this, and I'll talk more about what he says because it's very relevant. But yeah, thank you. Is it Heiko? Is that we pronouncing your name right? What?
Yeah, Heiko, yeah.
Oh, Heiko, okay, yeah. Thank you for your comment on the resources page. Yes, there are a lot of interesting resources on there. And I'm good at that kind of thing. And what I'm not very good at is publicity. That's probably why there are not as many people as I would have hoped on this call. But I really need to get my act together with the marketing side of things. So it was only a few people, it was the same number. It was like 5 people who did this course last time. So maybe that's just the karma at the moment, that it's a small group. And I never, feel bad about teaching a small group, except I would like to reach more people with this particular message. But I do like small groups because we can kind of get deeper into things and communicate more with each other. And I think it's nice to have that experience. So we'll see what happens as the weeks go on, but I'm really delighted to be with you all tonight. And as I say, I think probably without further spiel from me about the history and so on, we'll start with some meditation. So yeah, I'm going to just mute you all while I do that. Okay. Okay, so just take a few moments to check in with your sitting position. Didn't actually take note whether you're all seated on chairs or whether some of you are seated on a cushion or whatever. It doesn't matter. If you're on a chair, it's good to try and have the feet flat on the floor if possible, and have the back fairly straight and upright. And we've got a new person. I'm going to let this person in and then I'll start the meditation again. Just waiting while he connects to his audio. Ah, he's not connected. Well, I think I better just start and hopefully he will manage to do that. Okay, so once again, being aware of your sitting position, make sure it's comfortable without any stress or strain anywhere. Make any adjustments you need to make, whether you need to move your shoulders around, adjust your position of your back, till it feels very settled and comfortable. And bring your awareness into your body and just notice what's going on there. Be aware of the sensations, any discomfort in your body especially. And if you find any tight or uncomfortable places, just move your attention to that place and just bring a real sense of self-kindness and self-compassion. You can use your mind to soothe and heal that tightness, that discomfort. As if you're mentally massaging that part of yourself. Of course, if you want to do a bit of physical massage, that's okay as well. And continue to explore that inner landscape of your body. And you might begin to notice those places of tightness, stress, that they are somehow connected to events in the day or from earlier. So just letting go of that stress, whatever was going on, whatever you may have had any anxiety about or any upset, we can put that to one side And just bring that healing quality of stillness and openness, allowing the tightness to unwind. Allowing the busy waters of the mind to settle. And take another moment or two to continue that process of opening and relaxing. Just notice the busy thoughts racing around and let them slow down and quieten down in their own time. And gently bring your attention to your breathing. Follow the breath all the way into the body and all the way out. And in that way, tuning in increasingly to a moment by moment awareness of the present reality of your own body. And when the interior monologue breaks in again, just notice that's happened. Let go of the train of thought. Bring the attention back to the breath, back into the body. And gradually, a little bit of calm and stillness will begin to arise. And as you focus your attention on the breath, recognize how it is connecting you to the outside environment. And be aware of being in that environment, probably of your room. And just a general sense of awareness that it's there. And beyond the walls of your room, you're also situated in a larger environment. And begin to be aware of the life that is present there. So maybe you have a garden or there's a park nearby. In any case, wherever you are, there are plants growing, animals and insects and birds going about their business. That abundant profusion of life that often we don't pay much attention to is always there. The worms turning over the soil, the trees, breathing out the oxygen that we breathe in, and breathing in the carbon dioxide that we breathe out. In meditation, it's a lot easier to experience a sense of not being separate from this web of life. As you breathe in and out, just feel the exchange of energy and even information with all those other life forms, extending out wherever you are, if you're in the city, and of course dominated by the presence of human beings, but nevertheless countless forms of life everywhere. Out into the countryside, be aware of the forests, the hills and mountains, the lakes and rivers, the fish, the water plants, the oceans. The vastness of it all. The incredible, generous abundance of life on our beautiful blue-green planet. Our imagination cannot encompass it. Its incredible complexity and diversity, the extraordinary, intricate harmony of different life forms, their interdependence with one another, and our complete and total dependence on this web of life. In a moment, I'm going to stop talking and just allow each one of us to go on a journey, a mental journey, just exploring this world that we know with our intellect, but we don't so often connect fully with our imagination and our emotions. We have all the information, we know what is out there. In general terms, of course, there's an infinite amount to know. But just travel in your mind around this world, visiting some of the places of beauty, the amazing life forms that exist in the deep ocean, in the deserts, in the mountains, in the tropical forests, in the polar regions. Let's just do that for a few minutes. And really, of course, we will come across, the thought will arise of the damage that's being done. But I don't want to focus so much on that this time. Let's give ourselves the opportunity to experience the richness, beauty, magnificence of this web of life that we're part of. On reflection, maybe it is good if I just give a few prompts. Might help. Sorry if it's actually disrupting, you could ignore it. But maybe you want to take a walk through one of those tropical forests. Look up at the huge trees with their luxuriant growth of all kinds of plant life, animals, birds, bats. Imagine the rich smells, the sounds, and even with all that busy activity, maybe there's a sense of great peace in the forest. Or you might be visiting the savannah in Africa, the vast herds of gazelles, the lions prowling. Maybe on the horizon there's a herd of elephants approaching, tall grass waving, the sun beating down. You may have seen images of huge shoals of fish with that extraordinary swirling movement as they dance together in their migrations. The graceful dolphins, they're amazing aquatic dances. I'm just being aware of the incredibly subtle and complex interactions going on all the time. The cooperation that happens underneath the soil as the plants and the microorganisms work together to extract the nutrients from the soil. Extraordinary symbiotic cooperation between plants and animals. Like a vast symphony of incredible beauty, perfectly coordinated, as coming into being over an unimaginably long time span of evolution. It seems for the first time a species has emerged that has the ability to understand, at least partially, this symphony of life, how it has arisen and what it is. And only in the very, very recent past have we arrived at this understanding. So we're living in a most extraordinary moment. Where that vast miracle of life is awakening to consciousness of itself. So whatever our fears and anxieties may be, I suggest that we can celebrate that momentous evolutionary emergence we are part of. And wonder what it means. So take a few moments to gently and slowly emerge from the inner space that you've been in. And when you're ready, come back to the space over Zoom. So, yeah, thank you. I'm going to come clean here. This is not a structured course that I've planned, you know, with a curriculum, and that's not how I did it last time. And the way that I often like to work is really to be in the moment with the material and just see where it takes us. Last time, what I did, and I may experiment with that this time, I'm not sure, but what it kind of happened in the way that I explained. And what I did was I sent a link to the video each week to the group and suggested they watch the video, and then I commented on the video. And I couldn't do that this time because I didn't know who was going to come. Also, I didn't want to just, you know, recycle the course from last time because, as I said, it was quite a spontaneous thing. But what I thought I would do, I mean, a logical place to start seemed to me to be with the book called Eco-Dharma, which some of you may know. Put your hand up if you know that book by David Loy. Okay, 2 of you know, or 3 of you know. Okay, yeah, right. Okay, well then that's a good place to start. Yeah, and I don't. That is to say, I bought the book a few months ago, and I read part of it, and I've now read some more of it, about half of it actually, in preparing for tonight. But it seemed like it was a good idea to start with that. So maybe I'll talk about this book for a couple of weeks. But I also want to bring in some other material, a couple of other books. Yeah, so, and I'll put the link, thank you, Hak. I was going to put the link to this resources page in the chat if you haven't seen it. That it's on the, you can get to it through the Eco-Dharma page on our website for Jamming Leads. Anyway, it's simple enough, but I'll put the link in the chat. Yeah, so some of those books are in that list. Actually, I'm not going to start with David Lloyd. I'm going to start with a quotation. And this is from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I'll read it out. No, this is... Okay. This is Holiness the Dalai Lama. The earth, our mother, is telling us to behave. All around, signs of nature's limitations abound. Moreover, the environmental crisis currently underway involves all of humanity, making national boundaries of secondary importance. If we develop good and considerate qualities within our own minds, our activities will naturally cease to threaten the continued survival of life on Earth. By protecting the natural environment and working to forever halt the degradation of our planet, we will also show respect for Earth's human descendants, our future generations, as well as for the natural right of life to all of Earth's living things. If we care for nature, it can be rich, bountiful, and inexhaustibly sustainable. It is important that we forgive the destruction of the past and recognize that it was produced by ignorance. At the same time, we should re-examine from an ethical perspective what kind of world we have inherited, what we are responsible for, and what we will pass on to coming generations. It is my deep felt hope that we find solutions which will match the marvels of science and technology for the current tragedies of human starvation and the extinction of life forms. We have the responsibility as well as the capability to protect the Earth's habitats, its animals, plants, insects, and even microorganisms. If they are to be known by future generations as we have known them, we must act now. Let us all work to preserve and safeguard our world. It's a very powerful statement. And you'll probably all be aware that His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been speaking a lot about the ecological crisis recently. But that statement was written in 1990. And part of the reason I read it out was to kind of underline this. I think one of the most, important aspects of the situation that we're facing is that the very, very clear warnings have been spelt out. The writing was on the wall in letters 6 feet high. A long time ago. I think probably the most sort of significant, probably, history may judge this, the most significant warning call was issued in 1972 in the Club of Rome's report, The Limits to Growth. If you are at all interested kind of in the history, that is one of the very most important pieces of work that was done in relation to this question of how do we solve the ecological crisis. So the Club of Rome was a very high level group. It was commissioned by an Italian industrialist, and it was, very high level people from all around the world. The work was done at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They developed a computer model of the whole world system to look at, is our present industrial path sustainable, if you like, because by 1972, there was already a big upsurge of concern about environmental sustainability. It's usually, it's usually kind of dated from about 10 years previously. Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, another of the seminal, works that really sort of triggered the ecological movement. Extremely important book. And in 1965, there was a book published by the United Nations, edited by Barbara Ward and René Dubos, called Only One Earth. So that was the first really kind of comprehensive report on the environmental state of the planet and the urgency of the need to do something about it. But the Club of Rome report was, very, very intellectually authoritative, and it was taken very seriously. And this computer model that they developed basically allowed them to project forward what was going to happen to all the different environmental parameters like deforestation, desertification, water pollution, etc. At the time, they weren't looking at climate change because it wasn't until some years later that climate change became clearly identified as an effect of our industrial activities. So, I was aware of that in the 1970s, certainly by 1980, very aware that there was a problem there. But one reason why I mentioned it is because, they were sort of people that attacked it for, they were forecasting doom, and they said, well, they made it very clear. The scenarios that they presented in the book were not forecasts. They were not saying this is what's going to happen. The scenarios were based on different assumptions about what we will do, what humanity as a whole is like, if you like, is going to do. Are we going to continue the present trends, the present way in which we are thinking about the sort of our economic system and our industrial production and so on? but one of the main scenarios was the business as usual scenario, right? So that was the one that got the headlines, and what they were saying was, if this is followed, if this business as usual path is followed, then within about 35 years, we're going to run into very serious global environmental trouble in terms of depletion of resources, non-renewable resources, and deforestation and degradation of soil, etc. And they produced an update of the report 20 years later, where they had refined their computer model, and they stated that basically, in all essentials, what had occurred was completely in line with the business as usual scenario of what we've been doing, if you like. What the human species was doing on the planet was as the business as usual scenario, and the results, the effects, were very much as the computer model predicted. So there was a stark warning there. So that was in 1992, the same year as the Rio Earth Summit. So the Rio Earth Summit was the first really major global international high-level conference, addressing the environment. So we're thinking, okay, maybe there's going to be some change there. So 10 years later, the same group produced a 30-year update. One of them was Donella Meadows, who was probably the leading person behind it, an amazing, wonderful person. She died by that time, so there was only the other two members of the team that produced the report. 30-year update, and basically they've been saying in 1992, if it goes on like this for another 10 years, then we will have passed the point where we are destroying the Earth's resources more quickly than they can be regenerated. And 10 years later, business as usual. And then they produce more projections, if we continue with business as usual, this is what will happen. 10 years later, the last surviving member of the team produced another report, a 40-year update, projecting 40 years ahead. And he said in the introduction to the report, well, each time we've issued these reports, we've said these are not forecasts. These are just the scenarios of what will happen if we have business as usual or if we have a different scenario, But I'm not saying that anymore. I'm saying this is what's going to happen because the evidence is that business as usual is what we do. Well, now I'm sure all of you know that we cannot continue with business as usual without really facing a global ecological disaster within a relatively short space of time. So, I could already be being accused of being a doom and gloom monger. I'm not actually. No, I've been, by nature, I'm a very, very optimistic person, actually, in spite of having been involved in environmental activism for many years. Yeah, but it presents a conundrum, doesn't it? It presents a big, a puzzle, and a very worrying, troubling puzzle. Since we have known for many, many years now that if we continue as we are facing disaster. And that disaster is now looming ever closer. And indeed, arguably has already begun. But we don't seem to be changing our ways. First of all, it's very alarming. Secondly, it is quite puzzling, isn't it? And I think that's one reason, one of the questions, maybe I don't know, I think it was one of my titles, I don't know. Anyway, the question, why Eco-Dharma, Why are we not instead just going out and manning the barricades, joining Extinction Rebellion, or going into business manufacturing solar panels, or organic farming, or running off to the woods and starting ecological community, which I think would be a great idea, and I'm seriously considering doing it. Nothing wrong with any of those things, but maybe I'm going to give another quote, actually. Just give me a moment. I'm going to get another book. Hold on 1 second. This is actually the text for the other course that I'm teaching at the moment, the Deepening into Dharma Practice course, Heart of Buddhist Meditation. So this is a really, by the way, if you're interested, it's a really wonderful meditation handbook based on the Buddha's original sutra of the foundations of mindfulness. So if you want to know what original Buddhist mindfulness really is, it's in this book. But what I wanted to quote that I wanted to give, and this book was published in 1980, and 1980 was the year when I became a Buddhist, and not entirely coincidentally, it's also the year when I first became a serious activist. I was slightly involved in environmental activism, but it was mainly peace activism. It was the anti-nuclear weapons movement. I was also involved in anti-nuclear power as well, but mainly it was the weapons. And this was a very alarming time. I mean, it was much more alarming than now. And I want to emphasize that because, you know, one reason I think why I'm an optimist is because at that time, I literally thought the world was about to be destroyed. I went for 3 months, I went through my life with that conviction, and I'm not the only person. Many people thought that. We thought we were on the brink of a nuclear war, and we were possibly right. But the good news was it didn't happen. So I want to bring that message into the space, you know, very clearly, because, you know, I had an interesting experience. I was at an event, and, you know, it was one of these kind of alternative kind of fair, you know, where there were all kinds of different workshops and things going on, and it was brilliant. And there was an astrologer had a stall there, and I went and got my chart done. And actually, most of what she told me which was very interesting and absolutely spot on, was about a relationship that I was involved in, which was, you know, quite sort of that little late relationship dramas that happen, you know. And she was brilliant. It was absolutely spot on. It's amazing. And she also mentioned this, and she said, "Oh, and by the way, it's an illusion," because it was so real. This terrible tragedy that was about to happen was so real to me. And I wasn't really consumed with anxiety. I did go through a lot of anxiety some of the time, and I don't think fear, but I was very, very deeply concerned. I mean, the whole course of my life changed because I watched a film, absolutely amazing film, called The War Game. Joe, you might remember that. You know, yeah, you remember. Joe remembers that. Yeah. Anyone who was around at that time may remember that film. It was made in the early 1960s for the BBC. And this was around the time, you know, shortly after the Cuban Missile Crisis. So there was a wave of, concern about whether it was, a lot of people thought we were about to be blown to bits by a nuclear war. And it was not an unrealistic belief. And it didn't happen in the 60s, and things calmed down. But then the arms race continued, and the Cold War continued, and Mrs. Thatcher got into power, and Ronald Reagan got into power. And it was looking very, very dark indeed, very dangerous indeed. And the maker of the film released the film to all the anti-nuclear groups around the country. And it shocked people into action. It completely stunned me. And my life was never the same after that moment. And for the next 5 years, all of my energies, mental, intellectual, spiritual, were into what can we do about this? And then it went away. So the point is, it can look very doom-laden, but actually this thing called the future is a thing that only exists in our mind, isn't it? You know? Yeah, there will be a few, you know, there will be something, there will be, you know, what happens 20 years from now, there will be something. And we have our own image of that, and we have different images of it. And we can get very kind of locked into those images, and all kinds of emotions can arise from them. And, you know, those emotions are valid. And so if you're doing work with Joanna Macy's work that reconnects, you know, I worked with Joanna Macy in the early 1980s, actually. And I think that was some of the most important work that was going on. So she's an answer to the question, why Eco-Dharma? I mean, I think, you know, her work as a Buddhist, you know, activist for peace and environmental sustainability and so on, is really, you know, fantastic. Can't speak highly enough of Joanna Macy. 40 years she's been, you know, doing this work. And yeah. So, but to come back to this quotation, which is relevant. So this is Nyanaponika Thera. The book was published in 1980. It was written, I mean, it was earlier versions of it were written sometime earlier, about 20 years earlier. So I don't know when this actual passage dates from, but I read it in 1980. A message of help. In the present era, after 2 world wars, history seems to repeat its lessons to humanity with a voice more audible than ever, because the turbulence and suffering that, alas, are generally equivalent with political history, affect increasingly larger sections of mankind, directly or indirectly. Yet it does not appear that these lessons have been learned any better than before. To a thoughtful mind, more gripping and heartrending than all the numerous single facts of suffering produced by recent history is the uncanny and tragic monotony of behavior that prompts mankind to prepare again for a new bout of that raving madness called war. The same old mechanism is at work again, the interaction of greed and fear. Lust for power or desire to dominate are barely restrained by fear, the fear of man's own vastly improved instruments of destruction. Fear, however, is not a very reliable brake on man's impulses, and it constantly poisons the atmosphere by creating a feeling of frustration, which again will fan the fires of hate. But men still bungle only with the symptoms of their malady, remaining blind to the source of the illness, which is no other than the 3 strong roots of everything evil pointed out by the Buddha: greed, hatred, and delusion. I'll read one more sentence. To this sick and truly demented world of ours, there comes an ancient teaching of eternal wisdom and unfailing guidance, the Buddha Dharma, the doctrine of the enlightened one, with its message and power of healing. Okay. So, you know, that's one answer. Why Eco-Dharma? In a way, you know, I mean, I love this book because it's really very profound and very eloquent in the way it's written, but it's so clear and so straightforward and simple, and he conveys the I want to say transcendent simplicity of the Buddha's message, as well as anyone I know. Perhaps the other would be Thich Nhat Hanh, of course. So yeah, and you can see it there, you know. He's saying, well, if we want to tackle this problem, we're going to have to understand the root cause and do something about that. And the root cause has not changed since the Buddha's time. The root cause is in the mind. And although European civilization, I prefer to say European rather than Western, because in a sense it's more accurate. You know, I mean, America is a European colony, actually. I mean, white America. You know, America itself was submerged under its European colonists. But anyway, our civilization, if you like, if we all belong to that, has produced some kind of a miracle in terms of our intellectual understanding of the world, and our ability to manipulate the external world, because that is what the conceptual mind, the intellect, is very good at. But for some reason, you know, that way of thought, of, you know, scientific rationalist thought, which has, you know, since the 17th century has become the dominant thought form in our society, is not good at diagnosing and treating its own problems, you know, the diseases of the mind, if you like. And so, whilst the problem may sometimes appear to be too urgent, you know, for this rather slow and quiet kind of activity that we're involved in as Buddhist meditators, at the same time, I think what Nyanaponika Thera says is undeniably true. Unless we can get down to the root causes, we will not be able to tackle the problem. So that's one answer to why Eco-Dharma. And I know, I mean, I'm going to probably alternate quite a bit between very terrifying messages and very encouraging, optimistic ones, because this is the roller coaster that I've been on, especially in the last 6 months, actually, and I'll say more about that. I realize I've been speaking for quite a while, so I want to just make sure that I don't use up all the time. I want to have some time for a discussion and perhaps a bit more meditation at the end. But I'll say a few more words because I want to come on to David Loy's book. And really, I think I may only have time to say one thing about it. But first of all, I want to say that, yeah, I read about half of the book, and there's nothing in there that's new to me. But that is, I'm not saying that to belittle the book in any way at all. I think the book is absolutely brilliant, first class. It's just that I've been thinking about these things for a long time, and there is a lot out there, I want to say, you know, because it might look like Eco-Dharma is something new, but it's not. The quotation from the Dalai Lama that I read, and we'll come back to David Loy in just a second, but this is another really wonderful book. And this book was published in 1990, as I said, called Dharma Gaya. Okay, and it's a collection of essays by quite a number of writers, some of the, you know, the best known and outstanding Buddhist writers, and other people who are not Buddhists, but, you know, because the balance between the two, you know, it's very much about Gaia seen through a Buddhist lens. And I suppose that's the thing in the world that interests me the most. I was a member of the Gaia Society that was founded, you know, based on James Lovelock's work, and I met James Lovelock a number of times, and I, together with my mother, was a philosopher, and she wrote about Gaia, and she was a close friend of James Lovelock. And together with her and another person, I created something called the Gaia Network in around 2000. It still does exist, actually, but it's a tiny, tiny little thing. So this is, you know, one of my main interests, if you like, outside of Buddhism. But it's a very Buddhist idea, is the idea of Gaia. It's really about interdependence. And I'm going to give a whole talk about Gaia because I think it's so interesting and so important. But to come back to David Loy, so I was saying, you know, this thinking's been going on for a long time, but David Loy, I think, has an exceptionally clear mind. He presents the information in a very kind of well-argued sequential way. He's kind of got a very good handle on the basic logic of the problem, or the problems. I mean, there are many, many problems that he's writing about. Problems within Buddhism, as well as, you know, about the environmental situation. But one of the things that he says, which I think isn't said often enough and isn't said clearly enough, and it's one that concerns me a great deal. I've been doing a lot of thinking about this problem. Is he says one of the limitations of traditional Buddhism in relation to the ecological crisis is that in the Buddhist time, well, I put it in my own words, because actually I was writing about this just a few days ago, and then I read it in David Loy's book. So I may not be reproducing what he says, but he was on the same point, which was that, you know, at the time of the Buddha, if you like, the fundamental problem of human existence presented itself as an individual problem, right? The problem that we're facing is that human life is pervaded by suffering. We are, you know, we have this very fundamental, deep-rooted wish to be free from suffering. It's our deepest desire. And yet we do not know how to free ourselves from suffering. And it's not that the Buddha was just interested in his own situation. That's far from the case. He looked and saw everyone has this problem. And that's why he wanted to solve it. He wasn't just, there were a lot of people who were seeking liberation, if you like, nirvana. And there may well have been a lot of people who'd already found it on that individual level. But the Buddha was looking for more than that. The Buddha wanted to find the solution to the problem for everybody and give it to everybody. And that's what he did. And, you know, it's been there for 2,500 years, and many, many people have taken, you know, received benefit from it. And many, many people have gone further than just benefiting from it, but actually got to a state of complete freedom from suffering or complete enlightenment. But nevertheless, if you like, the way that it is presented is kind of, I mean, less true in the Mahayana Buddhism as well, of course, but still, even Mahayana Buddhism, you know, the way it's presented is, well, we first look at our own situation and we put that right, and we work to become enlightened, and then we can do something for, you know, many more people. David Loy, I think, quite correctly points out, and this is what I was also saying in my own writing, now the fundamental problem that we're facing is a collective problem. It's, you know, it's a problem of the society as a whole. And so this uncanny and tragic monotony of behavior that, you know, Nyanaponika refers to, I think we have to look at it and understand it on that collective social level. So when we see that, although scientists raised the alarm in no uncertain terms about climate change in the late 1980s, and very soon major global conferences were called. We had the Kyoto conference in 1997, where it looked as if the world might, you know, the world leaders might collectively decide and agree on a plan of action that would really do something about this. And they had already done so in relation to another global environmental problem, so it didn't look that hopeless. Some of you will remember the problem of the ozone layer, that the CFCs, these chemicals that are used in fridges and so on, and aerosols, were destroying the ozone layer, which protects us from the very powerful solar radiation that could cause a lot of damage. And that was a big industry. And within a very short space of time, from when it was clearly shown by the science that this was what was causing the problem, this international treaty, the Montreal Treaty, was agreed, and basically, we stopped having CFCs and aerosols. I think I don't know if they're completely phased out from fridges now, but anyway, the problem was taken up at a global level, and something was done. So it looked as though that might happen at Kyoto, but it didn't happen. And it didn't happen again at Copenhagen. And it didn't happen again in Paris. I mean, in Paris, there's agreement. In Kyoto, there could have been an agreement, and it was sabotaged to a considerable extent by the Americans, but by other nations as well. In Copenhagen, it was, again, primarily the Americans. In Paris, it was agreed. And then, of course, Donald Trump has torn up the treaty. So, but I don't want to particularly point fingers at America, but I mean, America is a special case, if you like. The special situation of America is part of what we're looking at. It is a unique situation. But anyway, there's been, massive kind of mobilization to try and tackle climate change. But the business as usual scenario is still running because those individual actions don't really, this point David Loy makes quite well, actually there's a nice quote from Bill McKibben here. Was it Bill McKibben? No, it wasn't him actually. There are some lovely quotes from Bill McKibben, a brilliant guy actually. But let me just see if I can find this. Excuse me, it'll take me a moment or two to find it. The second chapter, actually. Well, if I can't find it, I'll just try and paraphrase it. This is a problem, if I had a chance to prepare more, I would know the content more fully, but never mind. Anyway, the quotation, I will find it for next time. I think it may have been Bill McKibben. But what he was saying was, if 10% of people do all the right things environmentally, eat all the right foods and don't have a car and put solar panels on the all of these things, that's not really going to solve the problem. But if 10% of people put all of their efforts into changing the system, then that would solve the problem. So, essentially basically saying, the system is the problem in a sense. Now, the system, of course, is not something that exists in abstraction from us. And Thomas Hubel, the teacher that I mentioned earlier, he's very, repeatedly kind of comes back to the point that we are the system also, if we think that we're something separate and we want to blame the system, that's not going to be the right mindset to tackle the problem. But nevertheless, the problem is a systemic problem. It's not an individual problem. And so, that is one of the things that troubles environmental activists, that we are knocking ourselves out, and many people are making really big personal sacrifices to try to create serious change here, and feeling that they're getting nowhere, and feeling sometimes very angry, frustrated, they burn out, they fall into despair, and it's very sad. So this is part of the conundrum that I mentioned. It's not because people generally are so resistant to change. It's not, that people are greedy and irresponsible and so on, don't want to give up their cars. Of course, people don't want to give up their cars, but we've seen what happens, when something comes from the high level that says you have to change your behavior. And like that, profound behavior change happened overnight. And people were quite happy to accept it. So, there's no doubt in my mind that if the structures that, if you like, that are, you could call it the system, the financial system, the etc. If the will was there at that level to enact the changes, and I say enact because they have to be mandated, there have to be legislation, there have to be regulations and so on. It has to come from that level. But somehow there's something that is blocking that. And how does it relate to Eco-Dharma? I'm going to finish in a moment because I would like some time for questions. How does it relate to Eco-Dharma? Well, it's still true what Nyanaponika Thera says, that the root of the problem is in the mind, just as the Buddha said. So, I think some kind of socialists with Marxist leanings, whatever, might say, no, it's not, it's not a spiritual problem. It's a political problem. It's an economic problem. That's where the solutions are to be found. But why are those political structures and economic structures in place? They've been created by human beings. They arise from human motivations. So although I think it is a more kind of, I don't want to say it's a deeper problem, than the one that the Buddha was facing, but it's a more perplexing and complex problem. How do we change the collective consciousness? So it's not just an arithmetical sum of all the individual consciousnesses. So like I was saying with the behavior change, if even if sort of 50% of people got very ecologically minded, it wouldn't be enough to solve the problem. But if 50% of people were, quite clear that they could not vote for any politician who wasn't going to take a very, very strong line on this, if that happened, we'd see real change. So, the system and the individual are not disconnected, but the relationship isn't altogether simple. So how we think and how we act as Buddhists, I think is very important. I think Eco-Dharma is very, very important because it's possibly the only perspective on the ecological crisis. Well, there are others that are very similar. The book, the third book that I brought tonight I want to recommend all of these three books to you in the highest possible terms. This book, Spiritual Ecology: The Cry of the Earth, published in 2012. So this is, there is Thich Nhat Hanh is in there, Joanna Macy is in there, quite a few, well-known Buddhist writers, but this is not a Buddhist book. It's actually, the editor, Llewellyn Vaughan Lee, is a Sufi teacher, English, right, originally, he teaches in America. And there are people, there's people from the Native American tradition, there's Christians writing, Richard Rohr, wonderful Christian writer. People who have no particular faith, but they all share this very, I said in the Dharma-gaya book, they're not all Buddhists. So there is a wider kind of framework, if you like, of ecological spirituality or spiritual ecology is the label that's used, and Eco-Dharma is one part of that, if you like. But I think at this point in time, I'm going to say this and I'm going to finish. At this point in time, I think spirituality isn't much use without ecology, and ecology isn't much use without spirituality. So that's why, you know, I'm very happy to be working on Eco-Dharma, and I'd like to open it up to any thoughts and questions that you have. I'll give you a bit of time to to reflect on your question. There's this Zoom phenomenon, isn't there? I recognize, you know, that I'm also a victim to it, that I'm in a Zoom meeting. If I was in a physical meeting, I would say something, and then I'm in a Zoom meeting and somehow I don't exactly know why, but I just want to encourage you to be, you know, to be brave and come forward. Because I mean, I could do breakout rooms. It doesn't, you know, it seems a bit silly. That's one solution. That's actually, people always do that. If you put people in a room with one or two other people, then they talk, but there's only 5 of us, so we can imagine you're in a breakout room and you can. Yes, Joe.
I was wondering about this complexity you've just spoken about.
Yeah.
And what came to my mind was this matter that since the lockdown had been put into process, loads of people started to work at home.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, this is quite a good thing. Until you kind of balance that with how much more energy is being expended in different areas at home and so on. And all I'm saying here is that this could be the start, this move from working in big buildings and all of that kind of thing to working at home with a better work-life balance, as long as one can afford it. That's another thing.
Sure.
We might be seeing part of that link up between the system and the individual. But I think it's a fascinating way of characterizing the main problem. And it can be frighteningly overwhelming.
It can, yeah. And I do want to address that very seriously in this course. We were hoping in October to have a workshop with Francesca Paoletti, who is a senior teacher in FPMT, and she's an environmental engineer, but she did a workshop for the FDCW, the Foundation for Developing Compassion and Wisdom, which is the secular arm of FPMT, I suppose. Really about, you know, how do we deal with the sense of powerlessness and overwhelm. And I'm sure that'll be a brilliant workshop, but she started a new job, so she wasn't able to do it in October when we wanted her to do it. She will be doing it in December. And I do strongly encourage you, if you can make it to that talk on December the 9th. We are having a different workshop on the 28th, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. But just to come back to your point, Joe, it's a very good point. Yeah, I mean, I do think there's possibility there of major structural change. I mean, I was speaking to somebody a while back saying, oh, my their brother or their sister or brother-in-law or something worked for the Halifax. And they closed down their headquarters in Leeds. Because after the lockdown happened and they had everybody working from home, and they said, oh, we don't need this vast building that, I mean, you know, you talk about using energy at home, but those, you know, kind of commercial buildings use horrific amounts of energy. And everybody's commuting to and fro in their cars, you know, so people working from home certainly going to be a lot better for the environment in many ways. And I don't by any means, you know, want to ignore or sideline the problems that, you know, some sections of the society are suffering through having to be confined at home. It's presenting a terrible problem for a lot of people. For a lot of other people, you know, it's a bit of a kind of swings and roundabouts, isn't it? And it's rather unfortunate in our, you know, in this society in the UK. It's the well-off privileged people who are finding, oh, this is quite nice, really, and it's the underprivileged and not so well-off people who are having a really tough time, and that's very distressing. I was hearing some research on this actually, and it's not totally along economic or class lines actually. This was the Mind and Life Institute speaking to the Dalai Lama earlier this week, and one of them had done, so they've done some research on the effect on loneliness, you know, and it's not just on class lines or economic lines, it's other things as well that influence that. So but it does, yeah, it does open up, oh wow, we could be living very differently. I've been thinking about this since the mid-90s actually, because I had a computer company, and one of the things that I was thinking, being in that kind of commercial world, and wondering, why on earth do companies not now have people working from home? Because at that time, it was just starting to be really fairly straightforward for people to be able to do most of the work on a computer at home, come in one day a week. And what I was hearing was, oh, well, company don't feel they can trust their staff if they're not kind of looking over their shoulder. And I thought, that's really silly. And now we find, you know, suddenly they have to do it and there's no problem. And a lot of companies, I think, are closing down big facilities because they realize that they can get on perfectly well with people working from home, and some of those people may be much happier. So it's a great thing. And maybe it's a straw in the wind that there may be other major structural changes like that, which have not been thought about or envisaged. Because I mean, you know, I worked a lot in the kind of mainstream climate action networks. Didn't really hear that one, you know. Why don't we persuade the companies to let everybody work from home? I think it was mentioned once or twice, but it's not been a kind of main plank of the strategy. And I thought, it's really the most obvious solution, isn't it? First, we're talking about low-hanging fruit, you know. Wow, that's really easy to do. Anyway, I'm talking too much. I apologize, but yeah. Thank you, Joe. Anyone else?
Just have a comment in relation to sort of, you know, the corporate buildings. I was working in a kind of a very corporate building the past year up until lockdown, but when I started there, I kept sort of hearing this strange sort of resonance. Like when I kind of entered the building and when I was in the building, I was like, you know, what's that noise? You know, it was just very kind of, you know, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but I remember speaking to another colleague at the time, and I just saying, I was like, I keep hearing this sort of like kind of noise, buzzy sort of resonance kind of thing going on. He goes, oh yeah, that's the building. It's just, you know, and it was the pure power and energy and, you know, all the, you know, the exertion of all the power and energy that was going through the building with, you know, computers and servers and lights and the whole thing. And it was literally like this power hub just kind of, you know, going outwards, you know, and it was kind of almost surreal, because it was like, gosh, I'm in this walking, you know, thing, you know. It was it was almost sci-fi, you know, and it just made me think of like, okay, what's this doing to like the atmosphere around, you know, the ground it's situated on, you know, the people that are in it. It was just a kind of a surreal experience, you know. And even in terms of, you know, the working from home and remotely, and you know, going commuting as well. I used to commute quite a lot, and I did have to commute kind of when our lockdown restrictions ended there past kind of few weeks, and I was actually the only person on the train from my town to the junction station. Right. And I asked the steward at the time, I was like, am I, you know, has it been busy at all? And he said, no, it's literally, you've been like the only person I've seen all week. Wow. So, I mean, everyone seems to be sort of working at home where they can, which is good. But at the same time, then I had this train that was running and there was only one person on it, and there was like all that energy exerted as well. and you know, money expended, you know, in the running of the train, you know, for just, you know, that me basically. And you know, that was another kind of conflicting thought I had as well. So it was just, yeah, it's just it is such a kind of conundrum as well. But yeah, there were just kind of two things that popped into my mind. So yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, Joe?
I was just going to thank you for those comments. One of the things that also worries me, and I'm probably about to shoot myself in the foot, not uncommon for a philosopher, I might add, but the concern I have for working online, which I kind of extolled the good side of, I think also has to be held in balance with what impact that has on the people who are working, because you can, as I found to my annoyance a week or two ago, be day in, day out attached to your computer and on a Zoom thing.
Yeah.
So in a sense, you're then taking the noise of the building out into the main atmosphere rather than it being in the building. But the main thing is the impact on the mind, again, an important aspect of Dharma teaching, of being in a mental meeting all the time. So I'm extolling the virtues of not traveling, but still being connected with something that gives you joy or whatever it is for your livelihood, with what it's doing to you also if you're doing it on a long-term basis. I'm basically very much in favour of people working at home if they can. Obviously, there are going to be some jobs you can't do that way. And so, as you said, David, and it's implied in our own comments here, there's going to have to be a lot of thinking about this individual versus collective systems approach that we need to face this climate change with. I'm excited by it. There's a bit of fear, obviously, because I think if we start to see things that way, then we can probably more effectively deliver what we need. But I'm going to stop there, otherwise I'll start rambling.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, a lot of good points there. I don't want to pick on a couple of those. Selena, yeah, you said the sci-fi, and that's very true. And you know, one of the things that's sometimes I get disturbed about this is what kind of image of the future are we projecting, and how does that influence how we act in the kind of future that we create? Because, you know, predominantly this sci-fi world of the future, if you think about it, it's almost completely devoid of plants and animals, isn't it? It's a totally urban environment without even any, you know, trees in the parks or birds flying around, you know. It's just human beings and concrete, steel and glass. That's all that you see. And that's the kind of world that we have increasingly been creating and imagining that we can live in that world. And there's this, you know, I'm gonna tell you something amazing, actually. I mean, this is really amazing. When Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring was published, I think it was 1961, and it really was exploded. You know, this ecological movement had virtually not existed before that. And it started from that book, which is the main thing that she was highlighting was the dangers of synthetic pesticides, DDT in particular. And honestly, if that book hadn't been published, you know, DDT would have virtually killed the planet probably. But of course, there was a big backlash against the book. You know, people, you know, the kind of the people who thought it was going to be bad for business. And the one person actually said this. You know, the criticism. This business leader said, "We can do without plants and animals, but we cannot do without business."
Oh.
Now, it tells you something, you know, that, I mean, of course, it takes a fairly stupid person to actually say that out loud, but is reflecting the unconscious thinking that is there,
Yeah.
Isn't it? And that image of this beautifully sort of, you know, I mean, it's very kind of shiny and beautiful in its way, this amazing technological future. It's also very horrible because it's usually a very kind of nasty social environment, you know, full of aggression and war and hostility and things. But you know, this super clean, wonderful technological future that we imagine for ourselves is a complete and absolute fantasy. That was, and there are still many people who explicitly believe in it. You know, this transhumanist movement that believes we can transform ourselves into robots, and we can manufacture, you know, food from rock and all of these kind of things, and eliminate death. You know, this technological utopianism that goes beyond rationality is a very kind of still quite a potent you know, intellectual force in the world, and you know, it's from a Buddhist point of view, it's very clear this is a delusion. It is a, you know, it's a kind of diseased state of mind, but it's not an individual psychosis, if you like. You know, it's not an individual mental illness. It's a mental illness of the society as a whole, of the collective consciousness. So we have a new challenge. I mean, I'm sorry, I do seem to be speaking more than I meant, but I just want to say one thing about that, because it's particularly kind of thing that is I'm particularly feeling very concerned about at the moment. And I really don't know what any of you eat or don't. But I recently became fully vegan, or essentially fully vegan. And I think I've always felt this way, but it's been coming up particularly strongly. My very strong emotional upset at what we are doing to the animals that are bred for food. The inconceivable, unimaginable scale of suffering that is involved. It's not just the fact that they are killed, but it's how they are, how they live, how they're treated, and how they're killed. And I find, you know, I have to be very careful what I say, because perfectly decent people, you know, may feel I'm attacking them because they eat meat, or they may feel, or even I don't really want, you know, I don't want people to feel terrible if they happen to eat meat. But if I really am open about my thoughts and feelings about this issue, I think I may upset people. There's nothing wrong with those people individually, but there's something very badly wrong with a society that is treating animals in the way that we're treating them. You know, so this is where I get this difference between the individual level and the collective level. This interests me a great deal, and you know, I'm very pleased that David Lloyd brought it out very clearly. Anyway, we've got you know, about 15 minutes left. I would like to hear a bit more from other people if you've got anything to add or to ask. Yes, Claire.
Yeah, I don't like talking on the Zooms, but I'll
well done for being brave.
I'll do my best.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm really interested in the idea about the root causes in the mind. I suppose I hadn't really thought about that. I thought I'd been going along thinking, well, it's really obvious that we're destroying the planet. Why isn't something happening? It was that conundrum that you were talking about, that puzzle. It didn't make any sense to me. Of course it's obvious, but actually that makes a lot of sense. So what are we thinking about? Because there's a lot more teaching going into schools and industries about teaching people mindfulness. Is that the thinking of this idea? Because if we're saying that we need to work with the mind poisons, or however you want to describe it, then people need to know how to do that and want to do that and have the urge to do that. And there seems to have been great steps, towards that. And are we saying that we need a lot more of that, or are we saying we need other techniques and things for people to know about it? Are we talking about mindfulness really getting out there in industries and schools, a lot more? Because that's something that I'm very passionate about.
Okay, great
Yeah.
question. Thank you, Claire. Yes, so if this is the problem, and the problem isn't so much on the individual level, but it's on the collective level, what actually, could we do that might actually make a difference there? And that is a very big question, and it's going to occupy quite a lot of this course, I think. I'm going to say one or two things about it. First of all those things that you mentioned are good, and they are happening, and I'm really pleased that they're happening more. And I'm just enrolled actually in a program, teacher training program for compassion cultivation training. I don't know if any of you have heard of this, but this is a program developed by Thubten Jinpa, who was the Dalai Lama's principal English translator for many years, and founded a Compassion Institute to promote, secular compassion going through the society. And I will tell you, I decided about 3 years ago. Is it on that? Yeah, 4 years ago. That's right. I went to India for the Kalachakra initiation with the Dalai Lama in the beginning of 2017. And I had been very, involved and very passionate about some of the ecological actions, particularly I don't know if anybody the standing rock protest in America. The Native Americans are trying to blockade the pipeline, which is going through their sacred lands and so on. And I was very passionate about this, and thought it's incredibly important. And I went to Bodh Gaya, and the initiation took 13 days. So we were there with the Dalai Lama for 13 consecutive days. And all the High Lamas are there, and a big number of kind of eminent Western intellectuals and people like that. And I saw this vision, wow, this is incredibly powerful. Here's this man, and here are, the most influential thinkers in the world, both in the Buddhist world, but also many of the influential thinkers from the Western world as well. He is the one that they're really listening to. And that's an extraordinarily powerful position. And the Mind and Life Institute has brought Buddhism and science together in this incredibly powerful way. And this has come from the Dalai Lama. So now, I came back from that event with a different perspective on my own activism, and I saw how what the Dalai Lama is doing is, the Standing Rock protest, I still think, I would go there and stand with them if I could, At the same time, what I saw was it's kind of reacting to something that is, well, there's a phrase in Buddhism, already ripened karma. This is happening already. If we had been around 40 years ago to try to address the causes of the problem at that time, we might have had more chance to stop it. But by the time it gets to that level, it may be too late. But I saw what the Dalai Lama's been doing for like 60 years, ever since he came out of Tibet, very, very patiently, steadily, consistently building this worldwide network of support for the Buddhist principles of compassion and interdependence. And I thought, this is where I need to be working. So I actually, there were various other things that happened, but not very long after that, I actually let go of all my work on climate change and ecology, and decided to devote myself to the secular compassion agenda. So yes, I think that's incredibly important, and it is a big part of the answer. There's another part which I'm going to talk about possibly next week. I mentioned that Thomas Hübl, and it was a video of Thomas Hübl that was the top subject of the first of the Eco-Dharma talks that I gave in the spring and summer. And it's very interesting in many ways, but I would just say a couple of words about him. I know we're coming close to the time. How much we got? We've got 13 minutes, right? So I will just say this, and then perhaps if there's no more questions, we'll do some more meditation. If there's another question, we'll deal with that, and we'll just dedicate at the end. But in a nutshell, and I'm going to talk about this at more length. Thomas Hübel's been teaching on Zoom for quite a long time. I did a Zoom course with him in 2016. And he teaches on Zoom a lot. The last Zoom event with him that I attended, there were 10,000 people on the call. Or maybe it was 20,000. I think there was one that was 20,000. And this week, he's doing an event called the Collective Trauma Summit. So it's him and a number of other people. And last year, there were 55,000 people on Zoom on that event. I will send the links to these, because I think you can still join the summit, and it's free as far as I understand. So Thomas Hübel's work, as I said, is about collective trauma healing. And basically, he's saying one way to understand what is going wrong with our society is that it is in the grip of collective trauma. So this is a lot of work's been done on this. You know that there is both collective and individual trauma. So if something really terrible happens to you and you've not been able to process that event in the right way, it will have damaging psychological effects until you can somehow revisit that, because kind of like the energy pattern of that event is stored in your body because you couldn't process it at the time, and you deal with it by putting up psychic defenses, and those psychic defenses have a somatic aspect as well. Your body gets fixated in certain patterns, which can cause physical illness. But those trauma patterns can be released by psychotherapeutic methods. Now, Thomas Hübel uses the Zoom situation in a very interesting and powerful way. So he talks about how we are connected when we're on a Zoom call together. So you can feel it now, you know, we're hundreds of miles apart, but we are here together, right? Aren't we? I mean, you know, that was my first experience was with him, but I didn't do very much. But then when I did the compassion cultivation training, not the teacher's training, which I'm doing now, but 2 years ago, I did the participant level course. And at the end of it, the instructor, who was brilliant, actually, really very, very good. And she said, you know, this was the first time it had been done on Zoom, I think, certainly the first time she'd done it. And she said she was amazed that she had not thought for one moment that doing it in this way, people would get nearly the same level of value as they got from a face-to-face interaction, because, you know, you're not really with the people, are you? It's an electromagnetic. Well, something is lost, but she said, really not very much. She said, basically all the people on that course, and I can confirm it, I was one of the people, you know, we had a very powerful experience. So clearly that connection can happen in this way. And so he's saying, okay, well, here we are, there are 10,000 of us on this call. And we are connected because we have a common intention. So we are creating like a psychic energy field, which is very powerful. And so we can use that energy field for our own collective healing, and it will radiate out into the world. And I think he's saying that, you know, coming from a very grounded scientific base, actually. So this is another reason why I think Eco-Dharma is important. One that, you know, many people might think, oh, well, that's just some new agey, you know, flim-flam, whatever. But I don't think it is. I think it's real. And you can also, if you want to sort of rule out any kind of sort of direct effects of, you know, an energy field, you can talk about other ways in which that kind of connection could have a transformative effect at the societal level. And one of the interesting things about this lockdown is far, far more people are suddenly doing this, you know. So I'm actually on retreat at the moment. So the retreats are different now. So home retreats are a bit different from, like, you know, Land of Joy is holding a retreat with Paula Chichester. But because of this situation, I'm able to participate in the retreat and also be talking to you. So that retreat was planned as a live retreat at Land of Joy at Northumberland, where it would have been a maximum of, I think, 25 people. But there's 130 people in the retreat. So, you know, that's just typical. Like, none of you live in Leeds, do you? So if we were having this course tonight, you wouldn't be here and I'd be on my own. If it was just a live course at Jamyang. I mean, other people would come for other reasons, but you know, still, it's an indication, isn't it? Not only are many more people able to participate, but also many more events are global, international, or at least, you know, this is people from all over the UK. Mussolina's you're actually in Ireland at the moment, Celia.
I'm in Ireland at the moment, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we're even going outside the UK into the European Union. Yeah. So anyway, we're getting quite close to our time, and I'm doing my bit of talking more than I should, but yeah, and so that's a really interesting area, and we will explore that more. And I'm interested, you know, I'm going to read the rest of the book next week, and probably I will talk more about the book. I'll try and give a really focused talk about David Lloyd's book next week, because I do think it's an extremely important book. And I think I'm probably going to do more of talking about the books because, yeah, the videos, they kind of come and go. There's one video, though, that I will definitely talk about. And I'll mention it now because, you know, you might want to watch it. But the best talk, I think the best talk I've ever heard on climate change was given by Thich Nhat Hanh in 2012. And he was asked by The Ecologist magazine to answer 9 questions about the global ecological crisis. And you'll find it on YouTube. It's called Touching Eternity, Thich Nhat Hanh on Ecological Collapse. Oh, yeah, I'll put that in the chat. In fact, I'll possibly find a link. I'll find the link for it, and I'll find the other one that I was going to give you. Oh, right, wait a minute. 1 second, I'll find this link. And one other, I think. Right. Here it is. That's Thich Nhat Hanh. Yeah, and I will repeat the talk. Well, I won't repeat the talk, but I will also talk about that as one of the sessions in this course. And what else was I going to do? Oh yes, yeah, the link to these resources, right? Okay, I'll find that in a second as well. Right. Okay. So lots of things on there, including all of these books, but that's pretty much it for now, isn't it? We have a few more minutes. Yeah. Okay. So unless anybody has a very final quick question, then we'll just perhaps pause for brief reflection and dedication. Okay, so let's just take a moment again to allow the thoughts to settle, reconnect with the body. And again, let's take a moment to tune in to a positive aspect of all this, which is the fact that we are here now together. And you've all been willing to come and have a look and explore, is this something that we can do? And that's a very, very positive act, mental act. So in Buddhist terms, we could say, you know, it has great positive potential. Lama Zopa Rinpoche is fond of saying, all existence depends on the tip of a wish. So emphasizing the power of intention. In the Buddhist view, the law of karmic cause and effect is infallible. Positive action can only lead to a positive result. So when we feel overwhelmed by climate change, etc., I find it can be very helpful to bring this thought to mind. If I and others are creating positive causes, there will be a positive result. So we can rejoice deeply in the positive action just of the five of us here this evening, but also thinking around the world. There are tens of thousands of other groups in hundreds of different ways, bringing their hearts and minds to find a solution to this problem or to this vast complex of interlocking problems that we are looking at. So from all that positive action, we can definitely dedicate through this virtue. May our wounded world be healed. May our wounded minds of the human race be healed. May we remember our interdependence with the natural world, find a way to come back to harmony with it. May we bring wisdom and compassion to the healing of our damaged world. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, David.
Yeah,
Thank you.
do tell your friends if you enjoyed it, if you thought it was worthwhile. It would be great. And I know there was one person at least has told me she would have been here tonight but couldn't come and will be here next week. So I'll have at least one more. Thank you very much. And it's been very nice to get to know you a little bit.